Hello and welcome to Clipping In, and the first in a series of occasional Fireside Chats for autumn-winter 2025. Now, British summertime is a memory. The temperatures are falling, we've had our first frost. November's just a few days away. It feels, although it's the second half of autumn, in cycling terms, it feels like it's the start of early winter at least. And that's probably enough to send most of us scurrying to the cycling wardrobe, looking for reinforcements, looking for something warmer for the winter rides ahead. In many ways, I find that November, December, it's a little bit like New Year's Day, in the form that people put resolutions together and say, right, this winter I'm going to get out more. I'm going to get some big miles in. It's going to be different this time. The cold's not going to keep me in. The rain's not going to keep me in. I'm going to do something about it. When you go to your cycling wardrobe, if you find that there's a spare hanger and a gap there for a deep winter jacket, now might be the time that you think, right, okay, let's get into some of these modern jackets, these modern fabrics that are going to keep us warmer than ever. Invariably, the flagship models are the ones with Pro somewhere in the title. We know the naming conventions, and it makes us think, right, okay, spend what it requires to buy a flagship jacket, then I won't have any excuses, then I'll get out in all weathers, just like the professionals who are out there on their bikes in all weathers. But just before you take that plastic out and make the big purchase, this is the time when I say, whoa, hold your horses a minute. Just think, these jackets, these deep winter jackets, say, that are made for the requirements and in collaboration with professional riders, do their requirements line up exactly with your requirements for winter? You know, are those jackets really suitable for your needs? With professional riders, we're talking nowadays about riders with, let's say, 400 watts FTP. You know, their 1 hour power under pressure will say 400 watts. That's a lot of power at the cranks, isn't it? And when they're going out at winter, typically they might be base training at somewhere around 250, 260, 280 watts for 5 and 6 hours at a time, day after day. That's also a lot of power. And if then they're doing some tempo work, they'll be up at 320, 340, 360 watts. An awful lot of power at the cranks. We also have to think really about efficiency. In electric motors, we find that, you know, even the cheap, nasty, mass-produced motors that you used to get in vacuum cleaners that used to affect your TV picture, they can achieve 75% efficiency without any problems. If we talk of more refined designs, let's say brushless DC permanent magnet machines, we can get, with design optimization, 90, 92, 94% efficiency. High numbers. And by comparison, if we turn even to our professionals that we're talking about, they might achieve 25% if they're very, very lucky. But more realistically, we're talking of 22, 23%. If we move on to dedicated amateurs and dedicated recreational riders, we might see 20, 21%. And some riders might be as low as 17%, 16% even. So let's assume, for the sake of this video, we'll keep the numbers easy for myself and for everybody else. We'll say 20% efficiency for a cyclist. You know, that doesn't compare well with the electric motors. But what does 20% efficiency actually mean? For every 1 watt at the bottom bracket, mechanical power we'll call it, the body has to produce a metabolic power of 5 watts. So it's a metabolic power of 5 watts from what you might call biochemical potential energy. So where does the other 4 watts go? Well, it's predominantly heat. It's heat generated as waste that the body then has to control, and the clothing also, as part of the system, has to control. It has to ventilate it, disperse it, it has to handle it. If that heat remains allowed to build up, the core temperature rises and the efficiency drops even further. Obviously, we're talking there about professionals. But if they are training, as we said earlier, at 280 watts for 5 and 6 hours at a time, then that also means that they're generating over 1.1 kilowatts of heat. And clothing, as part of the system, has to be able to handle that. If we come down several rungs of the performance ladder to a typical light, small recreational rider who's trying relatively just as hard as the professionals and who's going out for 5 and 6 hours, they might only be putting 120 watts through the cranks, maybe less. And if it's 120 watts through the cranks, then it's 480 watts of heat. So their onboard heater is less than half the size of the professionals. The professionals are carrying around a small electric convector. The recreational rider's got a few light bulbs. There's a big difference. If we're talking about deep winter jackets, then one that's aimed at a professional, as well as having to be close-fitting and aerodynamic, being capable of handling all kinds of different weather conditions, it also has to handle that 1.1 kilowatts. We said earlier that if the professionals are doing tempo work, then the heat being produced is more like 1.5 kilowatts. I find it interesting that if you go to some of the clothing manufacturers' websites, when they publish customer reviews and testimonials, you find in a lot of cases that people have bought deep winter jackets and they say, oh, these are marvellous, they look great, the fit is superb, the jacket doesn't ride up when I'm down on the drops or I'm in an aero position, it handles all the weather with aplomb, but it's just not warm enough. And you find this as a idée fixe in all the reviews, that it's just not warm enough. And a lot of the people, if they show their location as part of the comment, you find that they're not riding circuits of Moscow. They're not somewhere out in the frozen north. They're in the Cotswolds or in Cambridgeshire, and yet they're saying, "Great jacket, but it's not warm enough." And therefore you think, well, why is it not warm enough? Is it that these riders themselves are not producing professional level power at the cranks, and therefore a jacket that's essentially optimized for professional level power and heat management is not keeping them warm enough? It's also interesting that from the days of maybe 25 years ago when the layer system was king, it seems now that we're favouring dedicated jackets that just go over a base layer, and they use technical fabrics for moisture management and thermal management. And the idea is really that you don't layer up. You just put a base layer and then the appropriate deep winter jacket on top, and that handles everything. You might add a gilet for a boost here and there, but they're designed as a single layer. It means that if someone who is only producing, much more modest levels of power at the cranks, if they buy a professional deep winter type jacket, then where does their heat come from? Because if they can't layer up underneath, then they have to layer on top. They don't really want to be adding lots and lots of layers on top of this wonderful flagship jacket that they've just bought. The idea of it is that you put one on and you leave it on for the entire ride, and then you just vary the ventilation a little bit of thermal regulation on the climbs or the descents. And so if they're not careful, they're going to buy a flagship jacket and be, well, very disappointed with it because it's not suited for their deep winter cycling. That's the whole point. It's been obviously designed with the professionals in mind, and it's been designed in collaboration with them. And they've fine-tuned it, and everyone's happy. The people who have got 350 watts at the cranks are very, very happy. Everybody else who's buying it has to think very, very carefully if that's for them. There are ways around it, I suppose. They could deliberately size up and lose that race fit, lose that aerodynamic fit, and then just layer up accordingly. But it's not really what the jacket's designed for, and you could probably find a more modestly priced jacket to do that job and leave you a little bit of room for layering. Really, all I'm saying at this point is that, as we've talked about with getting the right kind of rain apparel for you, as we've talked about getting the right kind of winter bike setup for your requirements, the same thing applies to winter clothing too. And don't assume just because something is a flagship model and just because something is designed for the professionals that it must automatically be the best for your requirements. If you're not putting out pro-level power at the cranks, then you may very well find that a pro-level deep winter jacket is not the right jacket for you. I'll leave it there, throw it open into the comments, and I hope you find it interesting in your pursuit of the ideal clothing system for the autumn-winter 25 that's ahead. That's all for this edition. See you next time back out on the Yorkshire roads.